we start, I want you to close your eyes. Look around you. You are inside the Sistine Chapel. All you see is Michelangelo's artwork. Now, take a moment to just wander around. Shall we start?
The Sistine Chapel lies inside the Vatican Palace, and you cannot visit the Sistine Chapel on its own. The Sistine Chapel is part of the Vatican Museums and as such can only be entered through the Vatican Museums.
The Sistine Chapel is one of the main exorbitant attractions to visit in the Vatican City. The glorifying highlight of the visit to the Vatican Museums is the famous chapel contains ceilings and altar frescoes by Michelangelo and is considered above all one of the artist's greatest achievements. But the chapel contains more than just works by Michelangelo. It is decorated from floor to ceiling by some of the most famous names in Renaissance painting.
The Sistine Chapel is the last room that visitors see when touring the Vatican Museum. It is under the impression that it's always very crowded and difficult to see all the works inside of it. Visitors can rent audio guides or books, a few guided tours of the Vatican Museums to learn more about the Sistine Chapel's history and artworks. Over the top, you can avoid the huge crowds by taking a privileged entrance tour or a private after-hours tour. The Sistine Chapel, or the Papal Chapel in the Vatican Palace that was erected from 1473 to 1481 by the architect Giovanni dei Dolci for Pope Sixtus IV, hence its name, who was very anxious to finish it. It is famous for its classy Renaissance frescoes by Michelangelo. The Sistine Chapel is a rectangular brick building with 6 arched windows on each of the 2 main or side walls and a barrel vaulted ceiling.
The chapel exterior is drab and unadorned, but its interior, walls and ceiling are decorated with frescoes by many Florentine Renaissance masters. The frescoes on the side walls of the chapel were painted from 1481 to 1483. On the north wall are 6 frescoes depicting the events from the life of Christ as painted by Perugino, Pinturicchio, Sandro Botticelli, Domenico Ghirlandaio, and Cosimo Rosselli. On the south wall are 6 frescoes depicting events from the life of Moses by Perugino, Pinturicchio, Botticelli, Domenico, Benedetto, Ghirlandaio, Rosselli, Luca Sorignelli, and Bartolomeo della Gatta.
Over the heel of these works, smaller frescoes between the windows depict various popes or great ceremonial occasions. The lowest portion of the sidewalls were covered with a series of tapestries depicting events from Gospels and the Acts of Apostles. These were designed by Raphael and woven in 1515 to 1519 at Brussels.
Sistine Chapel ceiling. The most important artworks in the chapel are the frescoes by Michelangelo on the ceiling and the west wall behind the altar. The frescoes on the ceiling, collectively known as Sistine ceiling, were commissioned by Pope Julius II in 1508 and were painted by Michelangelo in the years of 1508 to 1512.
The 12 Apostles was planned as a theme for the ceilings. Normally, they showed up only individual figures, not dramatic scenes. Traces of this project are seen in the 12 large figures that Michelangelo produced, 7 prophets and 5 civils, or female prophets found in classical myths. The inclusion of female figures was a very unusual thought, not unprecedented. Michelangelo placed these figures around the edges of the ceiling and filled the center spine of the long curved surface with 9 scenes from Genesis, 3 of them depicting the creation of the world, 3 the stories of Adam and Eve. Perhaps the most famous of these 9 panels are the creation of Adam, which shows the figure of God touching the fingertip of Adam to bring him to life, and fall from grace and expulsion from the Garden of Eden, which depicts Adam and Eve partaking of the forbidden apple in the Garden of Eden and leaving the garden in shame. And the other three will be stories of Noah.
These are naturally followed below the prophets and sibyls by small figures of the 40 generations of Christ's ancestors, starting with Abraham. The vast project was completed in less than 4 years. There was an interruption perhaps of the year in 1510 and 1511 when no payment was made.
The decorative program of the Sistine Chapel encapsulates the history of salvation. It begins with God's creation of the world and its covenant with the people of Israel. Located in the Old Testament scenes on the ceiling and south wall, and it continues with the earthly life of Christ, located on the north wall. The addition of the Last Judgment completed the narrative.
To sum it up, the altar wall, the Last Judgment. The painting on the ceiling took 4 years. It took its toll on Michelangelo's health. Working on his back, an impressive amount of pain must have entered his lungs, but it was certainly worth the effort. After finishing the work in 1512, Michelangelo switched to making sculptures, hardly painting anything until 1536, when he started on the Last Judgment.